everyone, and welcome to the show today. My name is Sharon, and I usually do relationships and travel, but today it's going to be slightly different. Today we need to look at the topic, who is benefiting from killing DEI? And so it's quite, I think, a relevant topic for what's happening in our world today, and particularly, of course, in the US. And so there are some worrying signs that I see, I come from a past where I've seen some of those signs before. I grew up in South Africa under the Apartheid system. And so I have first-hand knowledge of what that very traumatic experience was like. And so I see some of the signs emerging and, currently in the US. And so I'm going to share a little bit about my story later on. But first, let's look at what is DEI and what has it got to do with our society, and what does it matter if there is no DEI? So I think first of all is, as a society, we've recognized the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And killing DEI strips our society of its humanity. And this is not a good place to be in. So let's unpack that a little bit more and see what does it mean. If we look at what happened just a couple of years ago, cultural movements like the Me Too movement and Black Lives Matter have profoundly impacted the way we interact with each other, and has even impacted our dating landscape in the way that we date. And that's for everyone. There's been a shift that has taken place, and let's look into what are the gains and these movements have made. The first one is the Me Too movement. What did the Me Too movement achieve? This movement, brought about long overdue issues of consent, power dynamics in relationships, and harassment. For many, it's led to a much important evaluation of, what does a healthy relationship look like, and respectful relationship look like. And so, and this, may I say, has come at a high price. Women paid a high price for speaking out and for going through very horrific circumstances and situations. Now, we know that when one addresses issues of power dynamics in relationships, we know that men are struggling. There are men who have who are totally on board. They understand that this needs to happen and it needed to happen, and they're excited about what this is doing to the relationships. It's just bringing such a richer and meaningful experience to relationships. But we know that, on the other hand, there are men that are struggling. They are struggling, and they don't understand and know how to move forward with women just being more empowered in terms of setting those boundaries in relationships. And so all of a sudden, we are finding that there is this imbalance in society. And what I'm going to say is that women have paid a very high price to get to this point. And it is something that we should not give up. That is, a woman said the other day that, she really felt that just being empowered in her relationship to set some firm boundaries and to demand respect in a relationship. And she said that, even if it meant walking away from that relationship. So we do see that this is a dynamic that is, I think, is part and parcel of this pushback now in terms of DEI, right? Killing DEI is undermining the role that women have played. And so by killing DEI, women are now being forced back into a space where they now have to be quiet once again. So that was the Me Too movement. The Black Lives Matter was also pushed important conversations about race and inclusivity into our conversations and into our world. Many people all of a sudden, became more conscious of how systemic racism and bias shows up in our day-to-day experience. Even in the dating world, this has come up. And so, Black Lives Matter just once again lifted up such a very important area of what it means to be as a society, our humanity. And so for me, when I see DEI being made away with, actually it was very traumatizing, to be honest. And I'm going to tell you. So I grew up in apartheid South Africa, where white men were controlling and were in power and oppressing the majority of the people. And history has a way of telling us that this has happened before, and the signs are pretty much similar, sometimes the same, sometimes similar. And I'm going to just go through that a little bit with you and just unpack as to what are the worrying signs that I'm seeing. One of the first signs that I see is that they always go for the vulnerable sectors of society that is always impacted the most. The aim is always to hold back people intentionally, and there is nothing spared in inflicting misery on people, whether that means taking away healthcare or taking away educational rights, whatever that might look like. There is nothing holding back. It's got nothing to do with merit. Remember nature versus nurture controversy? Given the right tools and environment, everyone thrives. Another worrying sign is that, in South Africa, the church actually sanctioned the laws that these white men put forward. The church was behind it. And when I see this again coming up, it is extremely worrying for me. Another area that I saw sign was tokenism. Tokenism is not diversity. Tokenism refers to representation. We have a black person here, or we have a person of color on this side, and here we are, that is tokenism. Tokenism just means that you have put somebody there as a kind of a token to show that, diversity exists. And that's not true diversity at all. So, how did we in South Africa overcome our situation? I'm going to talk about that right now. The South African situation, really, change started, and it happened in a most unlikely way, like it always does. The high school students refused to accept the curriculum that the government had issued at the time. And these high school students in a black township, they just decided enough was enough. They were not going to take this any longer. And they took to the streets. And they were met with severe restraint. In actual fact, when they went to the streets, they met with the army was sent out to harm and kill where necessary. Well, the boycotts then started. It sort of mobilized throughout the country, and high schools all over the country started to go to the streets. I was just starting high school at the time, and yes, I went and I also marched for the freedom that I knew was important. It was going to be important for the future generations that change needed to come. Now, of course, I also need to say that it was the boycotts, the student boycott uprising, but it was also economic sanctions. And economic sanctions that really made a huge difference. In other words, pressurizing the government to make those changes, and if not, they were going to suffer economically. People that important people like Nelson Mandela, who was a lawyer at the time, he also participated in, spoke out, and of course, as you know, he was arrested and jailed for 25 years. I know that, sometimes we think and we hope that, it won't be as bad. I just, part of my coming out today is really think about who is benefiting here from killing DEI. I think that, it is a question that each and every person need to ask themselves. I love how, we live in a democracy. I love how the Koreans recently, a couple of weeks or a month or two ago, they took to the streets. The president was had wanted to sort of push through a martial law request, and it was met swiftly by the Korean people. In the middle of the night, people mobilized themselves and they marched and they went to the parliament and they protested that this was not what was necessary at the time. And so, for me, that was so encouraging that the voice of the people are still the most powerful voice that there are, that we all have a sense of power within us. None of us should remain silent and quiet and just hope that things will work out and just stand by the sidelines. Change always comes at a price. And so I hope that this is something that each one of you listening today will take seriously. And that is, who is benefiting the most from killing DEI. I can tell you now that the most vulnerable in our society are impacted the most. And so I hope that some of the stories, some of the highlights, some of the signs will speak to you. And I hope that this is something that you will take forward in the months that lie ahead. Don't think that it just goes away. I hope that this brings and makes you think about how do we move forward. So please hit the subscription button and leave me some comments. I'm hoping to do a series on dating in your 50s, millennials in your 20s, different ages. And so I'm hoping to do that in the future. So thank you, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.